Welcome to the Positive People Posse Living Room. I'm your host, Dom Green. I have a special guest today. His name is Nico Giles. And you know what? This has been long awaited. It's been a year since I've actually did an interview with you, but I was on your show, and now you're on mine. And so,
here we go.
You know, I think it's a lot's happened in the past year, and we've got a lot to talk about. Both of us being African-American men, seeing a lot of things that are going on and happening right now. And obviously we have the pandemic right in the middle of it. And then layer on top of that, we're in the election year. And, you know, it just seems like there's a lot of sensitivity. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of just not knowing what's going to happen. I feel like the world's just falling apart. So Nico, so how are you, man? Sorry I had to talk so long.
That's how you post it. No, I'm trying to just take it day by day. It's interesting, man. I just feel like this has really been a season for me of being present prior to COVID happening, prior to everyone being on quarantine, prior to things slowing down. It's just really been a season of trying to be more present. Actually, right before COVID and all that happened, I finished a book called Silence is the Key by Ryan Holiday, a great author on Stoicism. But I've just actually been rereading that book during this season as well, just to kind of reiterate that within myself, that it's, I think a season right now is really just about being present. And, because it's so hard to plan out into the future as it is, and so many things are adjusting. And of course, there's something to be said about planning ahead and being progressive and planning those few years out. And to some degree, I'm certainly still concentrating on that. But just specifically during this season, I'm trying to give much more of my energy towards just being present, man, and taking things as they come and managing my own internal emotions. And then addressing and adjusting when we're out of this season to then, what does the future look like? But that's been helping me a lot to just manage all of the chaos that's been happening during this year, during this season, is being present with myself and with those around me, and really just managing through this process, through this pandemic together.
Yeah, 100%, man. I will say that you actually helped me in the meantime. It was like a month and a half ago, obviously just watching every representation on TV and, everywhere we go, there's internal rage, there's external rage that's happening. And, I called another man like me, a man of color. And, we talked for about an hour and a half. I don't know how long it was, but it was long enough for me to feel the impact. You and I can both be very long-winded in our conversations. And I think that comes from passion. But one thing that I do recall from that conversation not so long ago was, hey, everyone's running their leg of the race, and just because people may want you to be very reactive, you don't have to be reactive. You can have your own angle, and you said nothing but respect for what I do. I don't ever want anyone to think that we're trying to put the pressure on what you need to believe coming from me. Positive People Posse is meant to be, a place, a safe haven for conversation, for people to represent something about positive mindset. We're all striving towards something, internal growth, personal growth, even your business growth or whatever your aspirations may be. That's what I wanted this brand to represent. And obviously unifying, we're coming at it at a different angle with unifying people. But I do believe that all messages need to be represented, even the ones that we don't want to hear. I think, with the polarizing view of the KKK, I almost want to know that people are racist rather than, not racist. Like I'm not racist and hide behind something. No, I want you to be who you are and just say it, because then it allows people to see that.
That's what's so interesting to me, or that I'm experiencing during this time, is we're moving more towards a discussion of either racist or anti-racist. And I think it's really powerful, and it's calling on people to either, if you are not a part of the revolution, you are a part of the problem type of thing. And it's calling people to say, And to your earlier point, I mean, you got to go out there and march. I don't mean you got to I hope you dismantle white supremacy, but what it means is that you are choosing to stand on the side of anti-racism and find some way to actively get involved, to find some way, even if you're just for the first time picking up a book and reading about, literature and that helps you understand the context and the structure of institutional racism that we live in. Whatever it is, I think that that's what's so powerful to me right now is like we're now within an ethos that for a lot of people who have been doing this work that I was mentored and trained under and now kind of doing it myself is like we're in a place where it's like you can't just say I'm not racist anymore. You have to say I'm anti-racist. And what that and in order to stand on that, it's like what doing to be anti-racist, not just simply how are you not being racist or you don't have evidence of being racist, therefore you're not racist. It's that you're either or you're anti-racist, because to exist complicitly in the American is to exist as a racist. And that I think is such a big shift that people are grappling with and wrestling with for the first time. I've seen, especially older generations, is like you can't just complicitly obey the system. That the system is inherently racist. So to just complicitly obey the system is to participate in racism. And I think that shift in mindset for some has been really good and really healthy. And for others, of course, whether it be because they don't want to change their own personal behaviors or because they get really uncomfortable talking about race or because they like the world the way that it is, that confrontation is the one I'm now ready to address. The confrontation of, oh, I'm not racist. I have a black friend. I'm not like, I'm like, that was like 20 years ago conversation. Now
there's levels to this.
Right. Now it's like, what are you doing to dismantle systems of institutional racism? If you're not doing anything, and like I said, it could be as simple as educating yourself. But if you're not doing anything, then you're on the side of the oppressor.
You were right. You were right about the aspect of like, you have to start with somewhere at some point in time. Like we all have to learn about something at some point in time, and it's brand new. Like for me, racism was very brand new to me at the age of 8, maybe when I was called the N-word for the first time. I didn't know what it really was, but I just remember the word being repeatedly, said to me. And then when I knew what the impact of that word meant, it began to hurt long after. And you just think about that, being singled out as a black kid in a suburban America. You remember like people are learning things, so where are you learning these traits? Like, why would a kid my age know that word? Right. They are learning that. And that's not just, that's just one representation. But, overall, one thing that I really admire about you, and we'll let the listening audience kind of know who you are. You've actually did documentaries on systemic racism that had a lot to do with our real estate, real estate within our community that we both grew up in, Kansas City community. And that documentary was on PBS. And, talk a little bit about that, talking about that systemic racism that that's still with us today.
Sure. Yeah. So to personalize it, I started my career in education, and particularly, or the first job I had was being a program manager for an African-American male teacher education scholarship program. So I had just finished my undergraduate degree. I was working at a community foundation and was recruited back to my alma mater for grad school in education to help start this program. So I think I was, 21, 22 at the time. And I didn't yet know that I was being put in position to be the young black face to talk about and handle issues of race for a large white institution. And that happens look, you can point at any institution, right? The token black guy, as we like to call it. You can point at any institution and this person exists. And I think at that point, at that time, I didn't quite understand what I was being utilized for. Now, certainly there was a give and take to it. From my school, I was getting a graduate degree. I was now working at a highly respectable institution. And so there was some trade-off there. But I from that, we had a really successful start with that, which pushed me to helping to start a university-wide Black retention and graduation program. And then that pushed me to doing work more deeper into the university and into the institution. And so at that point, about 3 years in, I realized what the power dynamic was, and what I was really up against by being this young Black and male to address issues of race on behalf of white institutions. And I think that it's a very slippery and dangerous slope whenever we allow the structures of institutional racism to pinpoint one person, especially to pinpoint a person of color, to be the person that now handles and deals with issues of institutional racism. And you see that everywhere, that typically at the largest corporations in the country, the only person of color on the executive board is the chief diversity officer. And that person is subjugated to handling all issues that have to deal with race so that corporate America can go on and worry about their quarterly earnings and dividends. So that was like this awareness, or coming to awareness moment I had 3 years into my profession and pursuit of education, pushed me to leave the institution and to go back to my hometown and to work in the urban core of my home. At the time, I would say where I was coming to was that if I was going to handle issues of race, I wanted to better understand the complexity of these issues. And so moving to the community and doing things of that nature. And then, so not soon after, with the background in media, started getting more into media to try and share these stories and to share the experiences that I was learning and to help spread awareness beyond just my own voice. And that soon on a documentary that you mentioned for PBS that was focused on housing discrimination as one way to help better explain and articulate this structure, this woven fabric of institutional racism that we live within, that it's not, that everything is interconnected in so many different ways. And so the one was focused on housing discrimination and particularly two practices. One, racially restrictive covenants that bar Black families from buying property in neighborhoods, i.e. increasing value in neighborhoods with property of increasing value, that bar Black families from buying into that, let's say, vehicle for middle-class American wealth. And the second was redlining, which is a term used for what was called residential security maps, which were maps placed on every city across the country that designated areas from 4 grades, red being the worst, green best, and banks would not loan money to areas with a red designation. And as I'm sure you can guess, every Black neighborhood in America designation. So it was this kind of compounding effect of increasing property on one side of the fence, decreasing property on the other, that barred a lot of Black families from entering into the vehicle of middle-class wealth that you see today.
One thing I will say about that, that documentary, I was at the premiere. What was the church that was held at Bethwood?
Metropolitan Missionary Baptist.
That's what it was. I looked around afterwards, and I saw people in tears.
Wow.
I'm not sure if you recognized it or saw that. Like a lot of times when I've done public speaking or whatever, we're wrapped up in the emotion for this moment, and you don't really get to really take it all in as you really want to.
Right. Of course.
But the reactions that I saw, it was very impactful. It was very impactful. And I hope to see more of stuff like that, because I think it just comes down to the humility as a human being. When you realize, there's disparaging differences with people. I talked to you today about the Jennifer girl with the ADA Act. the Adults with Disabilities Act, how she had to crawl up the stairs to basically try to help get this bill passed because of her disabilities and paraplegics not having the same rights as other human beings, just to make their lives a lot easier. When you see representations of people, like the physical aspect,
right,
you can see it. But when it's with racism, there's been this invisibility cloak of anything. Like you just don't see it the same way. And people can say that they have better intentions, or this is why things are there. But there's definitely some differences. I think it's good that we're starting to have more conversations about it now, and it doesn't need to be super abrupt. It doesn't need to be super violent at all.
Right.
There's so many angles, but getting back to what you were saying, the education aspect, I think it is important. And going back to the education aspect, I do realize that when I grew up in the Olathe, Johnson County systems, and probably just like the national standards of education, I realized that there was a lot that was left out.
For sure.
And so even me as an adult in his 30s, I still have so much to learn, and I realized that that's on me. That's my that's on me. I have to do the learning.
Yeah, right.
I have to educate myself, and hopefully most people are trying to surround themselves with so many different aspects of learning, not just one narrative, because the truth is somewhere in the middle. But I will say this, there's a lot that was left out. There's a lot that was left out. And so, as Black men, as also just human beings, every aspect of America, people are not getting the entirety of history. And and I think that's really what's happening right now. If anything, we're getting more historic quality during these times right now that can be documented, that can be represented, that will in time, and it'll probably expose a lot more. It'll resurrect the history of the past.
Right. Or hold people accountable, at the very least, hold people accountable for the false narratives that they keep perpetuating.
Yeah, and I can't be mad at every individual because of their skin color. I've never have been like, oh, you're white, you're the devil. No, that's not who I am. I'm all about all people. But the conversation will come up at some point in time about race, no matter what. I personally have went to jobs, and I had a really awesome job. 6-figure flex. It was well over 6 figures, making really good money. And in that interview, I remember them saying, hey, so you're going to be going down to the South where there's some good old boys, and, there's could be some uncomfortable conversations and things that could happen. How would you react? And, that's why are we having this conversation if race isn't an issue?
Right, 100%.
So, these things do need to be talked about. There are distinguishable differences. Just because I enunciate my words different, just because I come from the suburbs, doesn't make me less Black. It doesn't make me not feel the impact of what a lot of my people have faced, like my ancestors and people. And so I definitely know that, I think that we put people in categories often, but there's an impact that we're all impacted by this. Like, we are all impacted by this right now, the racial divide that we have seen. It's coming up right now. We are all impacted by this.
Yeah.
Just like COVID.
Yeah, right. The second.
Some more than others, but
Yeah, a systemic pandemic and a health
systemic pandemic. I haven't heard that.
Systemic pandemic, man. This has been happening. Actually, I don't quote me on this, but I think I saw something recently in Kansas City, and that said, more based upon the violence that Kansas is experiencing this year, a Black person is more likely to die from gun violence than from COVID. And so it's like, I get it. You know, we're worried about COVID. It's a big deal. We're taking all these precautions, but the same precautions to save a life from gun violence. And
Yeah.
it's just very telling. You know, it's very telling.
So you are living in LA right now?
I am, yeah. I'm back and forth a lot, given I mean, a lot relative to the time. You know, I wish I could be spending more time, but just the nature of how things are opening back up in different markets. So I should say, fortunately, I'm going back home to work on some projects, and yeah. So I'm here probably about 70% of the time, and then back to KC about 30% of the time.
So tell me about, what, like maybe from your perspective, how LA, what you've seen with the protests and versus Kansas City. If you spent, a little bit of time in both markets during these times, what have you seen?
Yeah,
the differences?
So I haven't actually been to any of the protests in Kansas City. So can you hear that? That's a classic. That's a classic LA moment when someone pulls up on a motorcycle. The motorcycle speakers are classic, and the people like pull up in like trucks with speakers out the back of the truck, just driving down the road. It's classic.
That's what they used to do with the mixtapes back in the day.
Right. That's how you put people. No, man. So one of the quorums I first had with being here in LA as everything was unfolding was I felt like I had done so much work to push issues of race consciousness in my own city, but to not be there during such a time like, and that was something I really struggled with, but I still chose to get out and participate to the best of my ability here in LA. So we went to, I think, 3 different protests, and yeah, man, it was intense, dude. Like the first one was like, I think the weekend after George Floyd's murder. And so it was like very unorganized. It was like something kind of got pushed out and spread and everyone showed up. And that was like, the one where we saw like buses on fire and police fire and people, ravaging through buildings. And like, it was like my fiance and I were like, we were here for the protest. I mean,
if you're there, you're guilty. So you're like putting yourself in a bad position. You're like, man, I didn't come here. I didn't come here to get hemmed up.
I felt it. It was the pure anger. It was like what you saw in Minneapolis. Like I think was like the day or two after, which was then the first couple of protests in cities across the country after that were a reflection and representation of that first rage that was experienced in Minneapolis, burning the police station. It was the rage people had and that people felt and were angry about. But yeah, so that was the first one we went to, and then we took a break and waited until there was some more organization around. And we just really wanted to be purposeful with what we were supporting at the same time, and so have been involved at this point now. Have been involved in supporting an organization, shout out, called We the Movement LA. We've went to now a handful, a dozen or so of organizations and things that they're doing every Sunday, I think it is, or Wednesday. They do 2, one's at a park, one's at City Hall. And the beautiful thing about those and participating in those now over time is that it's a group that is addressing systemic issues, but is focused on Black joy, and that at the heart of what they're doing, Black joy, at the heart of why they are showing up at the end of the day is about Black joy. And it's incredible, man. So it's there's a protest at the beginning, and it's intense and direct and purposeful, but soon after, it's a party, and they described it that way, that now that we're not going to allow the weight of this dim the light of the joy of who we still are as humans. And so that's a movement that we've been involved in, participating with since all of this has happened, and it's great.
Yeah, one thing that I have noticed, and someone had made mention of this, is the fact that back in the 60s and the 70s, when protests were happening, there was only a few groups, people. You know, there's only a few groups that you fall in, and now it's like so many satellite operations that like you got the people that are like straight up, let's burn the city down. Then you got all these people that are communicating different things, and like we're all there, but all of us have like different ideas of like how to represent you know, a movement and actually show your support. And you know, me, I'm on the end of the spectrum where it's like, hey, I want more conversations. You know, I definitely want to see people in packs, but I want people to be there in solitude, right? You know, like to have conversations. And the protest that I went to was in Harlem, and this was at Central Park. And I'm telling you, it was probably one of the most chilling times, you know, like just to see like how impactful, you know, getting people together for a cause where it's not causing violence, you know, it's really, it's not there to be silent at all. People are definitely there to educate themselves. And I could tell that this is the first time for a lot of people to join protests. It was my first time to be a part of a protest, really. You know, and so seeing the impact, you know, of like seeing these voices and how people got together of all shades, you know, that was Positive People Posse right there. It's just like seeing all shades being represented.
Yeah, that's been interesting with the pro here, and I'm hoping and I'm guessing elsewhere in larger progressive cities across the country is, you know, it's such a diverse group of people. Just like Black people out there marching for their own lives. It's like other people. We were at one of the protests we were at. I'll never forget this. It was like, you know, the line of police, and then you just see like, you know, people kind of scattered amongst, and then there's a Black guy who like turns around and yells to the crowd like, "White people to the front!" And like you just see like all, like without hesitation, like all the white people went to the front, and almost as a barrier between the police and Black people. And it was just such a powerful moment of like, you know, where we're at, that there's a large enough group of, let's just say, you know, other than Black people who are going to stand up for Black lives. I don't want to ever think that is what it would take, that it is necessary for other people to care about Black lives or Black lives to matter. But I do think consequentially that it will have more of an impact when people unite. You know, that's what we're both such a believer in. And so that was just a really compelling moment to see, and just, you know, in of the moment, like this wasn't an organized, you know, scene of like, let's make white people look good. It was like, you got to do it right now or it's not happening. And a lot of people stepped up to that moment.
And so one word that you did say was progressive in progressive cities. Us both being from the Midwest, from the same town, how do you feel like the progressiveness has came about with Kansas City in maybe the last decade, or what you're noticing right now? What are the distinguishable differences?
Well, I think there's a reason I'm in LA and you're in New York.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So, man, you know, I don't want to be harsh, and I don't want to be negligent of the efforts taking place, but more so, I don't want to allow room for half-assed effort to be seen as progressive work.
Yeah.
And so I would say that it's not good, dude. It's not good. I mean, if you're following, like, for example, the PPP loans that were coming out, right? I read an article by the Kansas City Star that said millions of dollars in PPP to private schools, and I believe also public charter. I think that was in Kansas City, Missouri School District. Private schools and public charter received millions in PPP loans, while Kansas City Public received $0. And it's so, you know, if you're as a city, if you don't have an uproar about that, about the continual disinvestment over decades, all the way from when, you know, 15 schools had to shut down to now with the continual disinvestment, if you're, and this goes back to my point of either you are a racist or anti-racist. If you are not in an uproar as your issue, right? If you're in education, whatever, you know, pick and choose your battles type of thing. But then you are complicit in participating in the system as it is. There goes the siren. That's LA vibes part 2 is a siren.
Welcome to my life.
Well, welcome.
No, I totally feel.
But you know, it's outrageous, man. Just the things our city is it's outrageous to me because I'm uncomfortably conscious. But you know, the systemic issues are deep, and so to me, I don't know if I would say it's progressive at all. I would say that it's extremely complicit and moves only when it absolutely has to in a direction that it is comfortable.
Yeah, you know, I would say that, you know, it's wild to look at like a town like St. Louis compared to Kansas City. There's some distinct differences. St. Louis has been on the it seems like the town has almost like lost its energy when I've been to St. Louis. It wasn't the same from when I used to go to St. Louis. Like there was this energy that's like kind of left, and I don't know if it was just because of the sports team or the Brown events, the Michael Brown incidents. But you know, I would hope that we can look at other cities as lessons, and also with the progression aspect. You know, I live in New York, you live in LA. Is it on the outside perspective? Like you only know what you know when you live somewhere, right?
For sure.
So what do I do? So do I take everything that I learned in a different environment and then I bring it back home? But like, who can we move if people are, you know, complicit? You know, if they're just complacent about their life and not wanting to move the needle forward.
Right.
But yeah, I think about that often. You know, I'm like, what would it take for people to? I see that they're standing, you know, and they're voicing on social media, but what does it really take? You know, and it's so tough. But yeah, man, I don't have the answers. And the thing about it is that's with education, you know, like we can't be so reactive all the time. Being reactive has actually hurt us so many times. I'm talking about like society in general. So we need to come with a better plan constantly. We need to start doing, not just appeasing people and just like making one race feel good for now, because once that's all done, you know, it ain't hot, it ain't cool, and no more to be black, you know, like I'm not trying to be a record. I'm not trying to be a rap record at all, you know, like, like I want to be a classic, okay? Like, can we all be classic? Like, can we all work together and understand that like we have to do things that make things more progressive. But it starts with the system, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, man, it's a lot of work.
We're gonna be dead. We're gonna be dead before we see change.
Right, and that's been a really valuable kind of awareness moment that I've been through that's allowed me to be more present. Is like, you know, we'll make marginal progress in our lifetime, but it certainly won't dismantle this that we see as the bigger picture that needs to be dismantled. And so it's like realizing that you're a link in a chain of, and figuring out the bandwidth and capacity that you fit within, and then where you can optimize your personal and your group's energy and the collective energy way that allows you to maximize that link, you know, instead of trying to stretch so wide that you actually dissolve your efforts into nothing. You know, that's just a moment of awareness I've been coming to, and the biggest part of that is really the self, you know, is really knowing my own energy. And what I was saying, going back to present, is like really, really getting still and quiet with myself to find my own rhythm and my own energy. Because as I mentioned, coming into my career, I was kind of, things were placed on me, you know, and I took on those identities. Like I now represent Black male educators. I now represent Black students at my university, or I now represent, and it was like those were placed on me to where I didn't quiet and still myself at any point to say, who am I most authentically? And then within the identity of a professional, how can I go out and represent that identity most authentically? And so that's really where I've been at recently, is trying to really quiet and still myself what's most authentic to me and not be utilized for a system or for the gain of others, or to check a box for someone else, or to go out and be asked to do a task themselves wouldn't do, and things of that nature.
No, I completely understand. Like it's a lot of responsibility, and yeah, it's uncomfortable. That'd be an uncomfortable feeling right there. Feeling like you have to speak on behalf of everyone, like
Yeah.
I get in those situations all the time where people are like, I had a conversation not too long ago, and one of my friends, I'll call him my friend, he called me up and he said, Dom, I just don't believe in racism. As in, what he was articulating was, I don't believe that it exists, is what he was telling me. And it's like, I told him, I don't believe in racism either. Like I don't like, as if like I don't believe like it should be accepted. You know what I mean? Like you believe that racism is really there. But like we have to be open and honest about that. But like it's just acknowledging it's not enough.
Right.
But
Right.
for me,
it's a very important. It's such an important step though that I've realized.
yeah.
Because if you can get a large enough group to acknowledge it, then there is the collective, I don't want to say allowance, but unfortunately that's, I think, is a fair description. There's the collective allowance to now do something about it, right?
Yes.
Like if everyone in the group acknowledges an issue, when a solution is put forward, we've already acknowledged there's an issue here. So either you can dismiss this solution, but you better come with another one,
Yeah, no doubt.
And so I think a collective awareness is really important, man. We were told back in school, right? We were told such a beautiful bow story of like, Rosa Parks, MLK, Malcolm X, boom, everyone's free, and it's like we were told they did such a good job of putting a beautiful bow on it that we grew up believing that everyone is treated fairly. And I think we have a real moment right now to reconstruct that in a way that creates space for acknowledging that there's still a lot of work to do.
Well, it's kind of like that bow tie is kind of like the 90s Black movie where
right.
At the end of the movie, it's like Tyrell went on to college and then became a successful business owner.
Right, defies against them.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, the 90s and early 2000s for Black people was like the golden era. As much which is so interesting, because as much as the fact that it was coming out of the crack epidemic, it was like the buildup of all these things, the continual displacement of families in education of neighborhoods. It was like the continual subjugation of these of people was happening. At the same time, beautiful, the birth of hip hop, the birth of what could now be called the first pillar of Black wealth. I've been hearing people describe it that way. Is now emerging, or was emerging. Now it's all been robbed, and now white people own all the Black music. But it was such a time of celebration of Black culture. But I think to that point of the first pillar of Black wealth, the reason that movement did not spill over into the success of the next and the next was we don't own any of that.
Yeah.
Epic Records owns it, et cetera. All these multi-billion-dollar companies own what should have been Black wealth to be redistributed into Black communities.
Well, I also look at it like, it's unfortunate that, music and sports are the representation of Black wealth in general.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it's very unfortunate that, like the getting a solid look at something else and having other representation, like I want to see it all, I want to see everyone being,
I agree.
it's like, I love, like, I'm all about my music, and I can see that like owning a culture in music, like through hip hop, through jazz, all of this, so much history came from, Black music. And I just think that like when you have been deprived from looking at business, looking at it as I'm a business entity as a person,
Right.
and taking those right steps. Mentorship has not been there for a lot of us because we don't have you don't have an abundance of mentors that can actually help us in many sectors. And, still to this day, like even with me, Positive People Posse 3P Media is a digital media marketing company. What I'm after is working with clients, and all I'm asking for is the opportunity to earn your business and your trust, and knowing that I'm going to be committed to you as every other individual, no matter what race you are. And but like we have to intersect.
Right.
We have every aspect needs to be. We have to intersect somehow. We have to.
Right. And I agree that it should be diversified. But if you look at, let's say there's a bucket, right, and that bucket represents Black equality or Black stability, or access to middle to upper class, whatever it is, that bucket, right? And if you say you want to diversify the way that bucket is filled, but all the other faucets are leaking, or there's a faucet wide the hell open, $500 million a year to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
You want to put that bucket under that 500 and pray to God Patrick Mahomes is going to redistribute that wealth to his community, because you and I both know no one should be paid $500 million for playing the game of football. Okay. Yeah. And if you to that idea that I'm worth $500 million to play the game of football, you are the subjugation of white culture, right? But if you say it is through the access of playing the game of football that I am now able to redistribute wealth to my community, then you keep that bucket in 500 milli, right? And you just, because the amount of time it would take to gain $500 million from this is what I'm saying, like kind of spreading ourselves too thin. But you see it, right? You see it. There's I would like to believe that you're seeing it at the national level, especially with the NBA and the progressiveness of the NBA, of Black athletes taking control of themselves, as you mentioned, as the asset, and finding ways to redistribute that wealth to their community. Because
it's a corporation now. If you earn 500 million, you are your own corporation. You
might have a stronger economy than the poorest country on the planet.
Yes.
Yes.
You know what I
mean? Man. I don't know.
That's a lot of responsibility, man.
man. But I hope you'll do well with it. It pays you some of that wealth to become a part owner in the Kansas City Royals. So
yeah.
Did you see that?
No, for real.
No, yeah. He became a part owner in City Royals. So
I had no idea. Like, this is not onion news. This is real stuff.
This is real stuff.
Oh my God.
The man is himself and the upper and the wealth of America. But
like it's so powerful for him because everyone wants a piece of him, right? And he can actually have more influence because they're like, well, he is a business, like, and I want his business. I want to do business with Patrick Mahomes. Right. And so he can actually address more things than you and I cannot. We're basically I'm talking about positivity. I'm talking about enhancing other people's mindsets and helping businesses and whatever. I can only reach so far.
Right.
But when you're an entity like him, he can pretty much control his narratives and say, I can pick and choose who I want to work with. And that's very powerful. I want to know that you're a diverse company,
Right. If we don't capitalize on this moment of Black athletes, it'll be no different than the moment of hip hop.
Yes. Yeah, man.
That the money, there was a chance for that wealth to be distributed to the larger Black community. it came and it went, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it came and it went. But like I said, I think especially in the NBA, I have a lot of hope for what's happening. I do. I have a lot of hope for what's happening.
I mean, we've seen what it feels like not to have sports right now, and I feel like people want something. They want something to do, something to watch, and you know, without that being like a center focus, it's been a part of our culture so much. And
Right.
also music right now, if people walked away and said, you know, we're not going to aid this machine or whatever it is, and we're just going to find a new way where it's not in sports, yeah, I feel like there'd be a big old hole. There'd be a big void. And we look at that because there's a lot of Black athletes. The majority of the sports that we support and watch are primarily dominated by the Black athlete.
Right,
and
for sure.
Gosh, man, could you imagine what it would look like, what NBA would look like if it was only one race? Like it not being Black at all. It would, like, I don't know, like, who knows?
People would stop watching pretty quickly.
They would. And so I think that also makes it more, we should be more sensitive to what's going on, right? Because it's like, well, hey, 100%. We'll just take away sports.
Right, 100%.
Yeah. So how much more time do I have with you?
I've got just a few minutes, to be honest. So
in closing, what do you have on the horizon?
Man, there's some things that we're working on. I don't know if I want to give any of them away yet, because
just a dose.
You know. Let me think.
Well, never mind. We can get to something else then, since you want to be all private. You're protecting your energy.
No. It's you. Come on, man. You as a building a media entity, you know, it's half of it is like making sure your ducks are in a row, and the other half is just not putting the cart before the horse.
Yes. But I had a lot that fell through this year, though.
Yeah, man. So it's like it's just protecting the energy, but yeah, we'll follow up on that soon.
Yeah, okay. And then, you know, I'd love to work with you still. You know, definitely, I feel like with our minds combined, we could do some really impactful things. Right. I always appreciate your conversation. Always appreciate your intellect, and you think pragmatically. I think that a lot of people kind of what I've noticed is they say a whole bunch of words and get out of their emotions, then they realize how they feel. They're like, I kind of feel like that. But, you know, like, you're a man who thinks, you know, you really think before you speak. And, you know, how do people follow you? Like, how do they find you?
Nico Giles Media, on just about anything you look for. NICOGILES Media.
All right, man. I appreciate you for your time.
Yes, sir.
And,
yes, sir.
Keep optimistic. And stay
appreciate
positive,
you, Don. Be well, brother. Good to see you, man. Take care, brother.